Belgian Ludovic Julie, or a blue-collar Belgian who's too big for his boots? Just how good is Leandro Trossard?
His way around Shalabah Matoma to Trossard. Can he finish? Leandro Trossard!
Trossard is not historically a major goal threat, but you have to bear in mind that he's played a number of positions. For Brighton, he's been played as a wing-back. So considering that, his goal threat and his goal numbers over the years isn't that bad. Based on this previous calendar year, however, he's played further forward, winger, second striker, even as a striker, and his stats are mightily impressive. He's got a high XG, and then he's outperformed that XG, a man whose movement enables him to get into regular goal-scoring positions and whose clinicality in front of goal allows him to convert difficult chances with ease. And we've seen him score these ridiculous goals at ridiculous angles, even with his weaker foot. But it is worth noting that Brighton are a chance-creating machine, and that can exaggerate the numbers. But in terms of the eye test, Trossard can bang off either foot, he can place with either foot, and there's a simplicity to his shot technique that makes it look very repeatable. So there's no reason why this couldn't transfer even when he's taken out of that Brighton system, provided he's put in another team-orientated framework where there's a lot of perpetual rotations in the final third. If there is a slight criticism of his shooting prowess, I'd say he looks better when he's inside the box. Outside of the box, I couldn't see him being a regular threat from distance compared to, say, like a De Bruyne type of player.
Trossard, dummying pass.
In terms of his dribbling, Trossard is an efficient dribbler. He's got nice footwork, he's got low centre of gravity, but he seems to lack the power and the speed to really drive past opponents and take a game by the scruff of the neck from a deeper position. His progressive yard stat is mediocre, and it resembles more of an attacking midfielder than a genuine wide man who tears up the grass and puts his full back through the ringer, leaving him to chase his trails. So that's why he needs to be in a territorially dominant side in order to be effective. And when the game is camped in the opposition third, he's a lot more effective. He can then just shift and feint to get crosses in or get shots off, rather than have to beat a fullback clean and really drive his team further up the pitch.
Was in the right place. That was nearly an absolutely sumptuous Arsenal goal.
Unsurprisingly, considering he featured for Brighton, who play a very possession-based system, Trossard has a high pass volume, which indicates he was constantly involved in the flow of Brighton's possession game. And even through the eye test, he looks like a player who's constantly passing and moving and making options for teammates. So in some ways, he could even be perceived as a playmaking winger, someone who's going to provide that midfield with an extra body and allow his teammates to outnumber their opponents in the midfield battle. Paradoxically, he's got awful pass retention numbers. 75% is below average. And that makes little sense, because when you observe him retaining the ball in a series of pass sequences for Brighton, you think, well, this guy looks pretty solid in possession, but it's when he tries to progress the game, his passing becomes a lot more error prone, to such an extent it brings down his overall pass accuracy. So he can make a simple 5-yard pass and keep the ball, but when he tries to make those 10-yard passes or cuter passes, his possession stats break down.
Lays it off. Trossard clips it forwards.
As we touched upon in the possession section, Trossard's creative numbers are poor. He's not someone who's outstanding at setting up teammates, overhits passes a lot, confuses himself by overcomplicating the final ball. He does these silly sort of loopy scooped passes, but he can't really pull it off. And most of his assists are pretty simple layups where Brighton have overwhelmed the opposition by flooding the box. There's very few instances where he's pulled off a worldly assist like a Christian Eriksen to break open a game that no one saw coming. So generally speaking, his creativity is lacking.
Half an hour, and here's Cropper! 2-1!
Trossard's crossing is a fairly solid part of his game. I think the fact that he's two-footed makes it an above average trait, but in terms of numbers, it's solid. It isn't spectacular, but one has to remember that Brighton are not really renowned for their aerial prowess, so those numbers might be slightly deflated as a consequence. I do think, as we've mentioned before, as long as his team is territorially dominant, I think because of that two-footedness, he will create plenty of chances via his crossing.
Good dab. Trossard. It's a good ball for March and turn square.
Arguably, Trossard's most impressive attribute is probably his long passing. It's such a beautiful technique. He hits it with such a flat trajectory, and it adds to the perception that he's more of a playmaking winger who adds to the midfield battle. Because he hits it with such a flat trajectory, it's quite difficult to cut it off because it's hit at such a speed. It's dangerous to try and intercept it in flight because, it arrows past you and then you're out of position and the person can just stride with the ball and occupy that space that you've just vacated. So overall, a big part of Trossard's game and something that he definitely will bring to a team that likes to bring its fullbacks into the game.
Good work by Matoma. Trossard.
In terms of Trossard's aerial game, he's competitive, he's a scrappy little individual, he does jump in for challenges. As to how effective he is, not very. He's just someone who's more of a nuisance. He gets into the battle and his team might win the ensuing 50-50 that comes from it, but he himself is not someone who's going to win many flick-ons or dominate his opponent in an aerial sense. Nevertheless, he has shown a capacity to be able to score goals with his head, but overall not a strong point of his game.
Leandro Trossard defending.
Surprisingly, for a player who plays for Brighton, who are renowned for their work ethic, their pressing, Trossard's defensive numbers are quite mediocre. And when you consider he's 28, one has to question just how much more potential he's got in his game from a defensive perspective. In theory, it's probably only going to get worse. So anyone expecting a pressing monster to join their setup, Trossard really isn't going to bring that in truth. However, having said that, he's got a high success rate in defensive duels, so when he is involved, when he is making a challenge, he usually comes away with the ball. Tactically, Trossard has played as a striker this year for Brighton. They've shifted to a 4-2-3-1 compared to last year where he was a left wing back. We've spoken about his style of play, someone who likes to get on the ball an awful lot, someone who likes to come alive when he's in the final third. That's where, as long as his team's dominant territorially, he can get crosses and he can score goals. You just don't want him to be that player who's dragging the team up the pitch from a defensive position. And to be fair, Brighton are not that type of team. In terms of who he's been linked to, I think Arsenal are a good fit in terms of him being a squad rotation option, someone who can come in for a Martinelli when he's injured or he's out of form. I think because of his experience at Brighton, he's comfortable in being a little worker bee in a system-based environment. And I think that would suit what Arteta wants from him. I don't think he's going to break into the first team and be someone who transforms Arsenal's fortunes. He's just not that caliber of player. In terms of other options, I think Newcastle would have been a great fit. They're a type of club who take, I wouldn't say mediocre players, but players who are not top end, but they're congealing them together to produce something that is more than what those players are capable of on an individual front. And I think considering St. Maximin's putting on a lot of weight, he's picking up a lot of injuries, Trossard could have been the Almiron figure, but on the left side. Would have been a great fit there in my opinion. Spurs, I think he would have been a minor upgrade on a Perisic, but from a Spurs fan's perspective, there's so many deep lying issues at that club. I don't think a Trossard coming in would have majorly transformed their situation as a club. So from Trossard's perspective, going to an Arsenal and being their Diego Jota is his best option. In conclusion, is Trossard going to be a world-class player? No, but he has a lot of attributes which are definitely useful in a squad player, someone who can score goals even in big games, someone who can participate in the midfield battle and allow his team to dominate the midfield battle. I think he's a great little squad option to have for a big team, as long as he's aware of that fact and his ego doesn't push for him to be something more than that. So I think, generally speaking, good rotation option as long as it's on a bargain price. I think if he was looking for a slightly bigger step than a Brighton, but also a starting role, I think Newcastle would have been a great fit during this current transitional phase where they're trying to establish themselves as a Champions League club. I think the next 2 years of his career, that would have been a great fit for him. But he's not someone who's going to leave Brighton and then suddenly become a world-class player. I just don't see that happening. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed that video. Please like, share and subscribe, and see you guys again next time. Bye.